Hey guys, this is Jason from Just Racing. For the past couple of weeks, couple of months, we've been spending a lot of time testing this new crankcase, what we call the 242 crankcase. Now, this crankcase is actually exactly the same size as the normal 225 200 clones, but it does have a bit larger cylinder. It's a bit longer, so it works very well with the 59 stroke crankshaft. And this system gives you a lot more torque throughout the entire RPM range, which is fantastic. For someone like me, I'm very heavy as a driver, so even when I put the foot to the pedal, I can feel a kick from the engine, which is really crazy because with a 225, it does struggle to sort of take me up to speed, but for the 242, it's very, very easy, and all the corner exits are very, very powerful. It's very smooth. I just love this new crankcase. So what we're planning to do is obviously try to phase out the 225 crankcase, because all our new parts that we've designed, like the billet case cover, all that stuff, it still works very well with the 242. So we're going to phase that out, the 225. So we're going to stick to the 242. But with the new amount of power comes a lot of problems as well. And these problems did exist with the 225, but it's not as pronounced as the 242. With the 242, it comes very, very quickly. So the first problem is oil shooting out of the cylinder head cover. And then the second one is the clutch just breaking, seizing up. So let me just show you what the cylinder case cover looks like first. So this is and has been always the solution that we use for the cylinder case cover. We don't really use the expensive billet versions, although we did test them out, and I'll show you a bit later. But this has always been our solution, and that is just the rubber tube and two valves for the breathing tubes. The problem with this setup, though, is that because the breathing tubes are just right above this one-way valve, what happens is when there's a lot of engine pressure and there's a lot of engine oil shooting into this space, the oil would just pretty much go straight into this one-way valve and it'll shoot out of this rubber tube. And the result is the entire back end of the cart is basically covered in engine oil. And the amount of oil that you'd lose from a couple of sessions is not little as well. It's quite significant. I would lose about 100 milliliters of engine oil just from this tube. So that was really bad. So we then tried the billet covers. So because there are no openings, there's, at least what we thought, no possibility for the oil to shoot out. But we were wrong, because what happens is, because there's so much pressure building up in this space, the oil would actually come out of these holes, these screw holes, and the pressure is basically pushing all the oil through the gasket, and it's just seeping out through these holes. And yeah, that didn't work. Although the amount of oil that we lose is a bit less, but it's not significantly less. I would say maybe after a couple of sessions, you'd still lose about 75, which is pretty bad. So we got rid of this idea. So the next version that we tried was this. So we still maintained the breathing tubes, but we added this one-way valve. And the original version of this is basically having this one-way valve, and then the inside is basically, we take out this layer. But we found that having taken out that layer still didn't do any good. So what we did was we added this valve and we added this layer back in. It does reduce the amount of oil that shoots out, but it's still quite a bit, maybe 25 to 40 milliliters of oil after a couple of sessions. So the biggest culprit really is just these breathing tubes shooting the oil directly into this valve. So yeah. So our next solution is this. We would have no breathing tube. We would retain the one-way valve layer inside, and we would have this one-way valve out here. So this completely resolved the problem of oil shooting out. But my problem now is, without the breathing tube, you'd have a lot of pressure buildup within the crankcase. The breathing tube ultimately was so that it can relieve the pressure buildup within the crankcase and then have it shoot out of the cylinder head valve. So in a way, you're actually relieving a lot of the um, resistance from within the crankcase and allowing the piston to run a lot smoother. That was the idea behind the breathing tube, and I think that's what a lot of people do as well. But right now, because we don't have that luxury anymore, so I resorted to another modification, and that is I would drill the hole in the middle between the two tappets to make it bigger. So right now I can make it about 8 millimeter in diameter. So it does allow for oil to drain a lot better into the crankcase, but I don't know how well it sort of transfers or relieves the pressure from within the crankcase to the cylinder head. Now, although there is this channel that is for the purpose of relieving pressure, it's always better to have an extra one. So this new setup is working very well in terms of keeping the engine oil inside where it belongs, the engine, but I just don't know how well it's relieving the pressure. So if you guys have a recommendation that I can try, please let me know, because having engine oil shoot out everywhere is just it doesn't make sense. So so right now we have the engine oil problem resolved. It's just that where the pressure is actually getting released, we don't know. So yeah, that's the first problem that we have, especially with the 242 engine. It's just way too powerful, so there's a lot of pressure buildup. So the second problem that we have is the clutch, and I'll show you what happens to the clutch. Now this is a problem that also happened with the 225, but just not as quickly. So what you can see here is this back plate is just cracked. This happens when the clutches can no longer take the power from the engine, and it'll just seize up, all the little friction pieces would just jam together, and then this whole thing will no longer spin, and yeah, this would happen, and then the engine would stall. So that's the problem that we have with the 225. Well, with the 225, we maybe can run it for like a day or two before this happens. But with the 242, it's just like 1 or 2 sessions of like 10 minutes, and this would just happen. And another problem that we're facing with the clutch is that with this kind of design, it's very easy for the engine oil or lubrication from the chain to actually seep into this area and actually cause a lot of slippage from the clutch. So when we start seeing that the engine's unable to reach its potential top speed, or it's having problems with exiting corner, we know that oil has already seeped into this area and it's causing a lot of problems. So this clutch, unfortunately, is the only option. I mean, the other option in the local market is this, so it's basically the same thing. We only have this or this, which is exactly the same thing. With, I mean, this kind of clutch, like there is a sort of better version, and that is the middle. They would have like this bearing, like the needle cage bearings. They would have it in the middle, but the problem with that is because they need to, have space for the bearing, which means that this diameter has to be bigger. That means the number of teeth has to be more. So this is a 10 teeth, and then the other one with the needle cage is, I think, 11. So that really screws up the gear ratio. We can't have that. So unfortunately, we decided to not use this anymore, and we want to build our own clutch. So this is what it looks like. So this is sort of like a work in progress, but it's basically a decent product that we've been testing for a while now. The back plate is very strong. You can see all these areas are very thick, very strong. It's pretty well covered, so we don't really see, or we haven't actually seen any problems with oil seeping inside, which is great. So another thing is this entire cover is a lot thicker, it's a lot stronger, so that's good. So far we haven't really experienced the clutch sort of seizing up or breaking in terms of like what we used to, in terms of the way we used to experience, but we have experienced some new problems with this clutch, and I'll show you real quick. So with this new clutch, that's what it looks like in the inside. These friction pieces are a lot better. They have a lot more grip, which is great. but because this is like their first product, so the spring that they used is way too soft. So right now the engaging RPM is only about 1600, which is too low, way too low. So we need to have the springs a lot harder so that it only engages around, like, I don't know, 220 or something, 2200 or something like that. So right now it's 1500, 1600. We want it at 2200 or something like that. Another problem is the case. All right, the case and this area has very small space. In fact, it's basically minimal. So when we first tested it, there's no like any washer here. This is what we added afterwards. This is a copper washer, and it's basically providing a very nice sort of protection between the two pieces of metal. But before it, that didn't exist. So what would happen is after amount of friction, it would bite into each other and it would seize up. So that's the seizing up that we are experiencing with this clutch. So that's annoying. So another problem is this area, this entire surface area, and here, this entire surface area. Again, there's really not a lot of space in between. So again, after a bunch of friction, it will bite into each other. So right now, our solution for the first problem is we added this washer, added a lot of lubrication, greases. And for this problem, we would sand down the area in the middle. And eventually, for the new product, we would have to add grooves in the middle so that grease can actually be trapped in there, and then help consistently lubricating the two pieces. So this is a work in progress, but it's really quite promising so far. It works very well with the 242 and the 225. So yeah, it's great, but yeah, there's still a lot of problems that needs to be resolved. And one final problem that we experienced, and it's actually quite a big problem, even more than the seizing up, is these two pieces would just come off of each other. So it would spin freely. So that has to do with the welding job that they did. Now, this is what I did. I fixed this myself. So you can tell the welding job sucks. But before I fixed it, the weld is even thinner than this. It's very, very like thin layer of weld. So it's really not holding the two pieces together very strongly. And given the much higher torque from the 242 engine, it really didn't take long. In fact, it was my second, like not even the first lap. It was like half a lap into the second session, and this entire outer casing just came off. Well, it didn't come off, but it was just spinning freely from the gear. So the cart wasn't moving at all. So yeah, that was a problem with this clutch, but hopefully all that will be resolved very soon, and we'll be able to get a mass-produced version of it, and so that we can start, building more 242 engines, because with the 242 engines, and all the parts that we designed for the 225, they work very well with the 242. So there's really no reason for us to keep the 242 crankcase anymore. We're phasing out the 225. The only engine that I'm keeping the 225 for would probably for the ZR12 Junior. The ZR12 Junior is a pretty powerful engine, and I'll show you what it looks like right now. So this is the ZR12 Junior. This is a very powerful engine for children around 7 to 12 years old. This engine is actually able to put up a pretty good fight with the Junior two-stroke engine. So yeah, it is able to produce very similar lap times, maybe just like 200th slower, but that really depends on the driver. If you have a really good driver, it's probably going to be a lot quicker, because the corner exit speed is just so much greater with this engine. With four-stroke engine in general, it's just so much quicker. But anyway, so this is the finalized build for the ZR12 Junior. It uses a flat slide PWK carburetor. It's a 21 millimeter carburetor, so it's one of the smaller ones, but it's still very powerful. If you have a 7 to 12-year-old driving on this, they're going to be flying. So if you have the right gear ratio, this thing can go up to 100 kilometers or 100 something kilometers. So this is really, really quick. Another engine that we've basically finalized and uses the new 242 crankcase is the ZR16 E-Level. That basically means it's an entry-level engine, but this is still a very powerful engine. It uses the VM22 carburetor that we've always been using for our previous engines. It's a pretty reliable carburetor. It's not really a sort of like a competition carburetor like a PWK, but it's still pretty good, very reliable, very stable. So basically is the ZR16 produces about, I think, 17 to 18 horsepower. It's much more powerful than Briggs & Stratton, like the 206 or even the World Formula. So it's a really good engine for entry-level adult drivers. So anyone who's just gotten off the rental carts, they can have fun with this. I mean, even this engine can go onto rental carts and it will still be a very powerful, fun engine to drive. So yeah, so that is basically a build that we've settled as well. So the other one that we've settled is the previous one that I built for the KTGP race is the ZR16E. That is the endurance version of the ZR16, but this version of the engine uses a different camshaft to this engine, and also it is using the 225 crankcase. So these two engines are a bit different in terms of the torque, but in terms of top end, the ZR16E may be a bit more powerful because it also has the endurance kit, so it's able to run a lot smoother. This engine is probably around 20 horsepower. It's a bit more powerful than this entry-level engine. And in our future video, I will be showcasing the ZR22i and also the ZR28R. So these are the two higher level engines that we are sort of finalizing the build. And once it's done, I'll show you the build. And yeah, it's going to be very powerful. And ultimately, we are just trying to provide like a cheaper alternative to the two-stroke engines, because not everyone can afford that kind of level of engine. So it's a cheaper alternative. It is good for club racing. I mean, ultimately, if you want to participate in those really high-level national or even international races like WSK, you'd still have to practice with the two-stroke engines. But these four-stroke engines are a very good start because they're equally powerful. It's just that the way they behave when you exit a corner is a bit different, and also on the straights, the two-stroke engines, because they can reach a much higher RPM. So ultimately, the straights are always their strong suit. But if you have a good gear ratio and if you're light enough, like around 70 kilograms, you'd still be able to achieve similar results. So yeah. Anyway, so these engines are really just aimed at being a cheaper alternative for people who really want to get into motorsport but does not have a really big budget. So yeah, we want to provide them with this sort of option so that they can also get into motorsport and eventually work their way up. So yeah, that's the goal for ZR Engine. So, and ZR Engine actually has a very interesting backstory why we named it that, but I'll talk about that in the next video. Anyway, so yeah, that's pretty much it for now. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.